7 signs of a bad starter before your car won't start at all. You turn the key or press the start button, and instead of the engine starting, something feels off. Maybe you hear a click, maybe the engine cranks slower than usual, or maybe nothing happens at all. At first, it doesn't seem like a big deal because the car eventually starts. You try again, and it works, so you ignore it. But that's exactly how starter problems begin. Not with a complete failure, but with small, inconsistent signs that slowly get worse over time until one day you turn the key and nothing happens. Now you're stuck because the starter motor is what turns your engine over. It's what begins the entire process. Without it, the engine cannot start, and your car becomes completely useless until the problem is fixed. That is why recognizing early signs is so important, because if you catch it early, you can fix it before it fails completely. But if you ignore it, it will fail at the worst possible moment. In this video, I'll show you 7 detailed signs of a bad starter, and more importantly, how to tell the difference between a bad starter and a weak battery, so you don't replace the wrong part. Let's go step by step. Sign number 1, clicking sound when turning the key. You turn the key, and instead of the engine cranking, you hear a click, sometimes one click, sometimes repeated clicks. That clicking sound usually comes from the starter solenoid. It means the system is trying to engage, but the motor itself is not spinning properly. Now this is where confusion starts, because a weak battery can also cause clicking. So how do you tell the difference? Look at the rest of the car. Are the headlights bright? Does the dashboard look normal? Is the radio working properly? If everything else seems strong but the engine won't crank, the starter becomes more likely. But if everything feels weak, dim, or slow, then the battery becomes the main suspect. This distinction is very important because many people replace the battery only to find the problem still exists. Sign number 2, slow or weak cranking. When your car starts, the starter spins the engine. That spinning is called cranking. A healthy starter cranks the engine quickly and smoothly. But when the starter begins to fail, that cranking becomes slower, heavier, almost like the engine is struggling. You may notice the engine takes longer to start, the cranking sound feels weaker, or the rhythm feels uneven. Now again, this can also be a battery issue, but here's the key difference. If the battery is new or fully charged, and the slow cranking continues, the starter becomes the likely cause. Because inside the starter, components like brushes and windings wear out, and as they wear, the motor loses strength. That weakness shows up as slow cranking. Sign number 3, intermittent starting. This is one of the biggest warning signs. The car starts fine one moment, then suddenly refuses the next, then works again. This random behavior is a classic sign of a failing starter, because inside the starter, there are electrical contacts. And when those contacts wear out, they don't always connect properly. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. That's why the car behaves unpredictably, and this is where many drivers make a mistake. They ignore it, because the car still starts eventually. But this is your warning phase, because once those contacts wear further, the starter will stop working completely. Sign number 4, no response when turning the key. Now we move into a more serious stage. You turn the key, and nothing happens. No crank, no click, no sound, just silence. At this point, the starter may have completely failed, or the solenoid is no longer engaging. But again, you need to think carefully. If everything electrical is dead, no lights, no dashboard, then it's probably the battery. But if everything works, lights are bright, radio is on, dashboard is active, and still nothing happens when you turn the key, the starter becomes the main suspect. This is usually the moment when the car leaves you stranded, because the early warning signs have already been ignored. Sign number 5, grinding noise during startup. This is a mechanical warning. The starter has a gear. That gear connects to the engine's flywheel. And when you start the car, those gears must engage smoothly. But if the starter is worn or misaligned, the gears don't mesh correctly, and that creates a grinding sound. You may hear it right when you try to start the car. This is not just noise. This is damage happening, because metal parts are grinding against each other. And if ignored, it can damage the flywheel, which is a much more expensive repair. So if you hear grinding, you should act immediately. Sign number 6, Starter stays engaged after engine starts. Normally, once the engine starts, the starter disengages immediately. But if it stays engaged, you may hear a whining sound after startup, or a high-pitched noise that continues for a moment. This means the starter is not releasing properly, and that creates stress on both the starter and the engine. This is not very common, but when it happens, it should not be ignored, because it can quickly lead to more serious damage. Sign number 7, burning smell or smoke. This is the final warning stage. If the starter motor is failing, it can overheat, especially if you try to start the car repeatedly. That heat can produce a burning smell or even smoke. You may notice this after multiple failed start attempts. This is a sign that the starter is under extreme stress, and continuing to crank the engine can make things worse. At this point, failure is very close. Now here is something very important. How do you confirm it's actually the starter? Because many symptoms overlap with battery problems. So always think in patterns. Battery problems affect everything. Dim lights, weak electronics, slow response everywhere. Starter problems are different. Electronics are strong, lights are bright, but the engine won't crank properly. That difference is your biggest clue. Also think about timing. Battery problems usually get worse quickly. Starter problems often start randomly, then become more frequent. So what should you check first? Start with the battery. Check voltage, check terminals, make sure connections are clean and tight. If the battery is fine and the problem continues, the starter becomes the main suspect. And if the car still starts sometimes, don't wait, because complete failure can happen anytime. And usually it happens when you're in a hurry or far from help. So let's quickly recap. A bad starter may show signs like clicking sounds, slow cranking, intermittent starting, no response, grinding noise, starter staying engaged, or burning smell. Some of these signs are small, some are serious, but all of them are warnings. Because once the starter fails, your car won't start at all. And now I want to hear from you. What was the first sign you noticed? Was it clicking, slow cranking, or complete silence? Comment below with your experience. And if enough people mention the same issue, I'll make the next video on that exact problem.